2, 3. Oh, it's heads. It has to be tails. Tails up. Okay, here we go. It's a small detail. 1, 2, 3. No, heads up. My bad. Heads up. Heads. Oh, my bad. It's not the disappearing quarter trick. It's the disappearing salt shaker trick. That makes more sense. It's a disappearing salt shaker trick. The quarter stays because it's money.
Well, it's a miracle, right? It's a miracle that this happens. Oh, this is a fun time to get into a really good topic as we continue this series that we're in Lent, where we are looking at the Jesus who's more than we think. Because this question about miracles, this question about did Jesus really do miracles and do they still happen? It is so much more than a yes or no question. Because if we were just going to go that, I go, yes, you can go home, right? It's an easy question to answer, but it goes to something deeper. It goes to something deeper within us because it speaks to our fears, it speaks to our worries, our doubts, it speaks to our faith, our hopes. There is so much more under that question that we have to explore. And so as we delve into this, to understand, what it means that miracles might still happen, what it means that they have happened before, and what that might actually mean for our story, we have to dig a little bit deeper. But we'll start with the basics. So our basic source of authority always comes from Scripture. And so let's start with this question: how many miracles are there in the Bible? And depending on how you count, there's different ways to do it, but approximately there are 87 in the Old Testament, 71 in the New Testament that are taking place over the course of God's story, over the course of this book of 66 books, 40 authors, 1,500 years from different regions. There's a lot of miracles that are happening. And then that brings us to this question of, well, did Jesus really do miracles? And I think if you go, well, we're going to go to the Bible, then yeah, the Bible's going to say he did miracles, of course. I think that's a good source of authority. I think understanding that's what we put our faith in is what it says in Scripture. But the question comes from those who doubt. Well, does anybody else recognize that he did miracles besides the Bible? Actually, they do. There are other sources that do, and one in particular I like to point out is Josephus, who was a first century Jewish historian who had no reason to prop Jesus up in any way, shape, or form. And he wrote these words. So now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as receive the truth with pleasure. Again, no reason to say anything like this about Jesus. But the stories about Jesus had spread. Everyone understood that he was more, that there was something he was able to do that others were not. And if you like to have notes like this, I would just say if you have your phone, you can take a picture, because I won't leave this up for a really long time. But I wanted to show you some miracles of Jesus. There's a lot. There's 15 of them. And number 13 on that list there is what we just heard in our reading today about Jesus calming the storm on the Sea of Galilee. And notice that one shows up in 3 of the 4 Gospels. This is one that is very well understood by all of the gospel writers, and it is one that I think we have to pay attention to. And what I really want us to pay attention to in this story about Jesus calming the storm is that when the storm comes, there is the reaction of the disciples, and then there is the reaction of Jesus. The disciples are freaking out. They are just panicking. Jesus is asleep. He is calm, cool, and collected. There is a difference in the responses. And they start to panic and they wake Jesus up and they're like, Jesus, don't you care that we're going to die? We're going to drown. The water's coming into the boat. Everything is going crazy right now. Help. And Jesus gets up and he says 2 words. Just 2 words. Those 2 words are this: Siopa Pephimosa. He says Siopa Pephimosa, which are translations into English. They do this really well. This is a perfectly good translation. I have no issue with it whatsoever. Silence, be still. So the 2 words become 3 words in English. But here's the thing. If you understand the very particular forms of the words Jesus is using, it's the great thing about Greek. One Greek word can really mean a lot of English words. And Jesus is saying a lot more than silence, be still in this moment. What Jesus is saying, to kind of give you the gist of it, is this. I command you to be still right now. This is not a suggestion. I am telling you 100%, you will be still right now. In fact, an action that has been done. You have been muzzled. Like an animal having their mouth muzzled. You will not speak. You will not roar anymore. And immediately, everything calms. Jesus, in 2 words, told the storm to shut up. That's what he did. He stopped it right then and there. Now, he did some more miracles. Fed 5,000, fed 4,000. He healed people who were blind. He healed people who were deaf. He healed people who couldn't speak. And that's not all. He also raised Lazarus from the dead, raised himself from the dead, ascended into heaven. And depending on how you count and who you ask, scholars will tell you that he did somewhere between 37 and 42 miracles, because sometimes you get a 2-for-1 special with Jesus when it comes to miracles, and so depending on how you count it, but I've got it listed here as 41. But it still begs this question, right? Okay, so Jesus did miracles. There was a lot of evidence for it, but aren't miracles something that just shows up in the Bible? It's just something that happens in the Bible, and we're not going to see them anymore now. So there's actually 2 camps on this. I'm telling you, their marketing departments were fantastic. They made it really creative names for the 2 camps. There is cessationism and continuationism. And what that means is there is a group that believes that the miracles, the gifts of the Spirit, they ceased with Jesus and the apostles, and they call themselves cessationists. And there's a group that believes that the miracles and the gifts of the Holy Spirit continued after Jesus and the apostles, and they call themselves the continuous. And so they, again, really creative names on these. But the question is, where do we fall in this? Now, as a pastor, I will tell you, I fall on the continuationism side, but I have a lot of reasons to believe that. I have a lot of reasons to believe that miracles still happen today because I've seen them. I have seen them with my own eyes. And so one of the things that happens with that, because our doubts start to creep in, we start to wonder, yeah, but what about the fakes? Like, what about the people that are trying to pull one over on us? Maybe you've seen the people on TV that are preaching and they say, you've been healed, and they pop somebody on the forehead and the person shakes around and, oh, I can walk now, or I can do. And a lot of times, let's be honest, it's actors. So even in the church, there's people that are faking it. They're faking the miracles. So how do we tell the difference? How do we tell the difference if it's a miracle or not? And so in trying to answer that question, I think it's fun to acknowledge the fact that there are fakes. And so I showed you at the beginning of this magic trick. Justin Willman is one of my favorite magicians. He does the close-up magic. He's really good at it. And in this same clip, he also shows you how he does the trick. And so to understand that, yes, there are people out there that do the fake thing when it comes to miracles, I thought, let's see how a magician does their trick.
Where did the salt shaker end up? It's in my lap. Here's how this trick works. You have to be sitting at a table, step 1, okay? You need a quarter, step 2. You need a salt shaker, step 3. You need a napkin, step 4. By telling them it's the disappearing quarter trick, all attention's on this quarter. And then you catch them by surprise. So here are the beats, and then you just gotta practice it. You put a quarter on the table, I'm gonna make the quarter disappear, or whatever. Baloney you wanna string out for them. You cover it up with a salt shaker. To make it even harder, you cover it up with a napkin. When you put the napkin over the salt shaker, you kind of want to drape the napkin so that it assumes the shape of the salt shaker. That is a key part of the secret, because the right kind of napkin will look like there's a salt shaker under it when it's there and when it's not there. See, it kind of holds its shape like a little bit of a shell. It assumes the shape of the salt shaker. So I do this in an order of threes. I say, let's make that coin disappear. 1, 2, 3. I kind of relax. I hold my hand near the edge of the table to prime them to not feel like this is weird. I don't let go of anything yet, okay? I was like, oh, it needs to be tails up, not heads up. It doesn't matter. We do it again. 1, 2, 3. You act like it didn't work again the second time. You bring your hand to the edge of the table here, and what you do is you just lightly loosen your grip so the salt shaker falls in your lap, but the napkin doesn't look like anything changed. Act like you don't have a salt shaker in your lap. I try to do that on a daily basis. Then you come back here and you say, you know what, the coin might be too hard. Let's try the salt shaker. And then you just smash it. They weren't expecting the salt shaker to disappear. They were expecting some lousy coin trick. You've surpassed their expectations. At this point, you just kind of just sit and just hopefully you don't have to stand up at this point because it'll be a little weird. And then you find a good opportunity to relax.
So it's possible to make things fake that seem really amazing, right? And so we have to acknowledge that. But here's the thing that I want to challenge us to consider in this. When it comes to them, and when it comes to Jesus, he's more than we think. And so there is a difference between the charlatan that is trying to pull the wool over your eyes for different reasons and what Jesus is trying to do to show you who he is. So as we consider that, I think we also have to ask this question, why should miracles matter to me? Why should they matter to me? And I would argue that we're all going to be up against it at some point, if we haven't already, right? I guarantee you every person in this room that is over the age of 30 has been up against something hard. And a lot of you that are under the age of 30 have already been up against something hard. We need miracles in our life. We need God to show up in powerful ways in our life. And so I want to share today with you some miracle stories that I have witnessed to help you understand, again, why I believe that miracles do still happen today. So one of the ones I want to tell you about is when I was in seminary. Part of the requirement of seminary is that we go to be a chaplain for a time. So I did a summer where I was a chaplain downtown at Methodist Hospital. And you get called into all sorts of situations. One of the situations I got called into was a family that was getting ready to go into surgery wanted a chaplain to come pray with them. And I said, sure, and I came down. And when I got there, the room, it was just really down. Everybody was really worried. And I'm looking at this older gentleman who's the patient. He's probably in his upper 70s, and they're just saying things aren't looking great for his surgery. We'd really love some prayer. And we're about to pray, and the doctor walks in. And I said, hey, do you want me to step out for a second? And they said, no, just stay. So I stayed, and the doctor is just telling them every bad piece of information possible. I mean, he's just like, look, we'll go in for the surgery, we do this, and good chance that makes this happen and you're going to die. Do this, that's going to make this happen, you're going to die. We do this, you might live, but it's going to be miserable. Like, there was just no good outcome this doctor is coming up with for this patient and this family, and they're just, like, what do we do? And so, doctor leaves, and I'm going to pray for the family. And I want to challenge us here, because sometimes when it comes to people that seem to be up against just insurmountable odds, when we're asked to pray for them, we can do this thing where we sort of let God off the hook a little bit, where we go, hey, God, if it's your will, would you take care of this? You sort of want to give a space for God not to answer the prayer. And I want to challenge us to think that God is bigger than that. That God is way bigger than that, and that he actually wants us to pray boldly. And so as I sat there listening to what the doctor said and knowing, the odds are not good for this person, I still felt compelled to pray boldly for healing. And so that's what I prayed for. I prayed that God would completely heal this person. I prayed that it would just bring full restoration to his body. And, again, I knew that prayer also could maybe not get answered in the way that I was hoping. I understood that going into that prayer, but I still felt called and believed that I needed to pray boldly for that. They said, it should be back out 90 minutes or so. I said, I'll come back around that time and check on you. And when I did, I went and checked on a couple other patients. I came back. It was like a party was going on. And I'm like, what is happening here? And I turn, and there's the guy who's supposed to not be doing well. And he's up joking and laughing with everybody and looks perfectly fine. The surgery was a complete success. He's doing great. And everybody is celebrating. Everybody's praising God. And then just like miracles happen. Like this is not what anyone expected. And suddenly this guy is okay. Last year I preached on addiction, and I had the help of one of our congregation members, Mike Jansen. And Mike told his story of addiction, and part of his story revolved around going into, he'd gotten a gig that he was very excited about. He was basically being tasked with bringing Super Bowl 40 to the city of Detroit and making all of that happen. And so he's doing that. He's been working on it for 3 years, making all the things happen. And it's just before the Super Bowl. And the stress levels are going up, and he starts using more and using more and using more. And he ends up staying in his office one night, uses too much, and ODs. And in doing so, a colleague of his comes in and finds him barely breathing and has to do CPR on him. And they get him to the hospital, and he's alive and everything. That's actually not the miracle. The miracle comes in who God brings into his life. Because it was after that God brings in a woman into his life who would then become his wife, and that woman that would help push him and drive him towards the road to recovery. And because of that work, and because of her prayers and faith, and the two of them working together on that with God, he has been sober now for almost 18 years. And it is a miracle to see that kind of transformation in someone's life. Miracles happen big and small every single day. Every single day. So we have to keep our eyes open for the miracles that will occur. In 2016, my wife had been in and out of going to the doctor, kept having these issues, and they kept going, we're not sure what's going on. And finally, we ended up in the hospital, and they were trying to figure out what was going on. She'd been there a couple days, couldn't quite figure it out, and I had to go take care of some things. So I had a buddy who said, I'll come sit with her. My buddy's name is Marty, and Marty's in our small group, and I just want to take a moment. So you got those sheets at your chairs there. It's a good reminder that you need people in your life. I needed my small group, and so you might want to get in a small group. I just want to plug that for a moment. Because Marty goes and he sits with Joy in the hospital, and after a few hours, he gives me a call. He says, hey, Murph, I don't know what's going on, but he said, I'm looking at Joy, and he goes, the only way I can describe it is she looks like death on a cracker. Like, I think you need to get up here. And so I come on up to the hospital. Things start moving fast. They're like, we got to transfer her to another hospital. We're in an ambulance heading that way. We get to the hospital, and there is a nurse there. It's in the evening. There's a nurse, and she looks at Joy, and within a minute, she was like, you're going to have surgery. And all the doctors have left. The cardiologists are gone. And so she calls back an entire team of cardiologists. I feel like I met an angel in this woman that was looking after my wife. She called them in. They all come back in. And within minutes, she was heading into surgery. And so they wheel her bed out of the room, just leaves this one chair in the room. And I just know, I just sit down, I just kneel at the chair, and I'm just starting to pray for my wife. Like, we've got to get her through whatever this is. And all of a sudden, the nurse came into the room. She came up beside me, and she said, "Can I join you?" I said, "Sure." And we prayed together for my wife. And when Joy got wheeled back in, they had taken 20 ounces of fluid off her heart. It was night and day difference. Like, she looked like she was going to die. And then she came back in, and I want to show you the stark difference. The photo that you see right there is the day of the surgery. The photo that I'm going to put up here is exactly 2 days after the surgery. Night and day difference between where she was and what happened. And I believe that nurse was an angel, and the only thing that might convince me she wasn't was that weekend we went to church, and we had a spot we normally sat in, but for whatever reason we went to a different spot that week. I challenge you to move around a bit in here. We went to a different spot that week. And as we were praising and singing the song, I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around. There's the nurse. The nurse that saved my wife's life is sitting right behind us. And she gives us a hug, and she's so excited to see Joy's up and moving. And I still think she might have been an angel. You just never know, who you're going to run into. But she knew exactly what to do and saved my wife's life. It's a miracle. Well, I've told this story before, but even just a couple years ago, we ended up back in the hospital for Joy, and she had they found a tumor the size of a baby's head. And so you're like, ugh. And the doctor does surgery. He's an oncology surgeon, and he says, afterwards, he said, I'm just telling you what I saw. He said, this is cancer. He said, you just need to be ready for chemo. You need to be ready for aggressive treatment. We're going to get the pathology report, and we'll tell you exactly how aggressive we need to get with this. Okay. Then we show up to the doctor's office, and he says, this is not the conversation I thought we were going to have. He said, but I've got the pathology report here, and there is absolutely no cancer. And he said, I've been doing this for years. I know what I saw. And this report says there's nothing there. It's clean, and we ran the test again and again and again to make sure. And so she ended up being fine. Now, I want to take a moment right here because you're hearing this and seeing these stories that are happening in my family. I want to be super clear on this. There is, you don't get extra miracles because you're a pastor. There's no special Jesus juice that we get that makes it all go a little bit better for us. Just like everybody else, okay? We're just praying like everybody else and hoping that the miracle will come. And that brings us to a thing that I know is probably going through some of your heads right now, because I know it's gone through my head before. Why does God choose to perform some miracles but not others? It's a question we wrestle with. And let's be honest, we wrestle with that question because it's sort of the PC version of the real question. What we're really asking, if we really get down to it, is why does God allow some people to die instead of giving the miracle? That's what we really want to know. And I wish I had a nice, neat, with a bow on it answer for you. I don't. I don't know why sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why God chooses to do certain things because I don't have the mind of God. I don't know what he knows. I don't see what he sees. But here's what I do know. He will always heal. Sometimes healing does not come this side of heaven, but it still comes. It still comes sometimes when we step into eternity and we are completely healed. I don't know why sometimes it happens this side of heaven and sometimes it happens on the other. I don't have an answer for that. It's one I would love to have an answer for. But if I'm honest, I don't. We don't know the mind of God. But I do know that his heart is for us and that his heart is for healing. And sometimes these miracles happen in so many ways that we don't expect. We often can think of healing as being something that's medically what needs to take place. Sometimes it's not about medical at all. Like in the case of the Hustons, family that is dear to my heart here at this church, and you just saw Gwen up here singing. And the Hustons had a moment that came in their lives where things seemed to be tearing apart, and they ended up getting a divorce. And the family is sort of trying to figure out what to do with these two separate lives. And you just never know what events are going to transpire. But they both decided at some point that they needed to sign up for Alpha, to take that class. And we have this thing we do when you sign up for a class here at Hope where we let you know, you can say, hey, I'd love to be in a group with so-and-so, or I would like to not be in a group with so-and-so, and we honor those things. And I will tell you that 99.9% of the time, we get it exactly like you asked for it. Jill, our admin, is amazing. But for whatever reason, this time, the two of them ended up in the same group, even though they were like, nope, don't do that. And we were like, well, do you want us to fix that? Like, we can rearrange that? And no, it'll be fine. We'll just stay in that group. Well, over the course of the weeks of Alpha, they started to notice something, and the people in the group started to notice something. It was like, you sure you guys don't belong together? Like, what's going on here? And so they went through discernment. They went through, counseling, different things to really get to the heart of that. And then I had the absolute honor and privilege of getting to preside over their remarriage as they brought the family back together. I'm telling you, that's the first one of those I've ever done. Like, this doesn't happen really often. It's a miracle. It's an absolute miracle. This is God bringing something back together that most of the time doesn't come back together. I believe in miracles. And I understand, right? Like, you can sit there and you can, as someone who may be skeptical, doubting, you can go, well, these miracles you're telling me about, we can explain this through medicine. We can explain this through, relationships can get messy. Like, we can try to find all these reasons to explain it away. All right, explain this one. So I went to a public pool with my family and with my friend Marty from our small group and his family. Again, I just really want to tell you, small groups are wonderful. And as we were all swimming, the kids started sort of egging us dads on and said, hey, go jump off the diving board. I was like, sure. I grew up with a pool in my backyard in Tennessee. This is the kind of diving board I grew up with. I knew what you do on that. It's a couple of quick steps, a jump to the end, and boom, you're right off. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to show my kids who've never seen me do this how far out I can dive into this water. This is going to be great. Dad's going to look so cool doing this. And I got up on the diving board, and I was looking at it, and I was like, man, this looks different than my diving board, but I'm sure it'll be fine. So I go do exactly the same thing. I take a couple jumps. I hit the end of the board. And that board doesn't stay stiff like this one does. It does something different, like this. And as the board is going down, and it's all in an instant, I'm sort of panicking, like, what is happening? Like, why am I not springing off of this thing right now? And I sort of like freaked out. I'm like, is this board going to break under me? Like, what is happening right now? And I made a decision in a moment, a dumb decision, but I made a decision that what I should do is try to jump off the board while it was still going down. And what happened was, as soon as I leapt, the board snapped back up and grabbed my big toe right up under my foot. And I knew immediately it was broken. Like, there was no doubt in my mind I had just broken my toe. But for the sake of this story, for you to understand what happened, you need to believe that my toe was broken. So I'm only going to leave this up for a couple of seconds. But that was my big toe after this event, right? Now, I said I was only going to leave it up for a couple seconds, so there you go. It's gone. But that is what happened to my toe. So we go to church the next week, and I decide, all right, I said to my wife, you know what, I'm going to go get some prayer because this is hurting and I'm just hobbling around. And I see a good buddy of mine, Tom Herman, a prayer warrior. He's one of the prayer partners. And I'm like, I'm going to go see Tom. And unfortunately, where they were, there was actually a couple steps to get up to the prayer partner. So like I had to hobble up to go see Tom. And I get up there and I tell Tom what's going on. I said, man, I just need some prayers for healing because this is really hurting. I'm tired of walking around like this. So Tom prays for me. And he's a bold prayer as well. And he prays for some bold healing. I get done and I hobble back down the steps and hobble out to the car. We drive home and we get in the garage, and then it hits me. There was something I needed to take care of in the house, and so I start focusing on that. And I go to walk in the house, and we have a couple of step-ups from our garage into the house, and I just do right up. And so as I did that, I'm like, wait a second, what just happened? And so I'm standing there inside the door going, I didn't feel any pain walking up that step. And so, I'm like Ginger. I'm like, I'm not going to risk this. But so I start just kind of leaning forward on the toe. And I'm like, there's no pain. Huh. No pain. Okay. There's no pain. Now, minutes ago, I was hobbling around in lots of pain. Now, none. And none since. I don't know how to explain it other than a miracle. I was healed in a moment. But I know that our doubts get in the way. I understand that they get in the way. And because here's the thing, again, no special Jesus juice here. I just really want to stress that. I'm sharing stories that I can share. Some stories are others to share. But here's the thing that I know is that sometimes our doubts get in the way because we think that to get the miracle, we have to do something special. Sometimes what we actually are asking is this question: have we done enough to earn the miracle? We start putting stuff on ourselves. We're like, you know what? I haven't been good enough, or I haven't done this enough, or I need to do a little bit more for God in order to get the miracle. That's not the nature of God. I just want us to understand that. That's not who God is. He does not need you to do anything for him. He wants to do a lot of things with you. He doesn't need you to do anything for him. You do not have to earn his grace. He took care of that. How do I know? The Bible tells me so. If you look in Jeremiah, God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." And Jesus says these words in John's gospel that I think we really have to pay attention to, and that is, here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows. He doesn't say, if you have trials and sorrows. He doesn't say you might have trials and sorrows. He says you will. You absolutely will, this side of heaven, have trials and sorrows. You're going to be up against it. And then he says, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. The one who calms the winds and the waves with 2 words has overcome the world. The one who walks on the water has overcome the world. The one who raises people to life has overcome the world. The one who multiplies a couple of fish and a couple loaves into 5,000 being fed has overcome the world. These things, miracles start to happen, you have to go, I can't explain them all. God's up to something. I don't know what, but he's up to something. My son Joel, back in October, he's been driving for a little bit, got his license. He's driving to school, doing the things, and then he gives me a call, And I'm so glad it was him calling me and not somebody else. But he said, Dad, I flipped the car. And I'm, did I hear that right? Are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm okay. But the car, and he FaceTimes me. Like, my son was in that car. My son was sitting in that car when all that happened. And he opened the door. He climbed out from right there. And he was perfectly fine. Not a scratch. We went and got him checked out. Nothing wrong with him. It was a miracle. Now, I can hear the doubters, right? Well, the car did what it was supposed to do. It took care of him. Yeah, it did. Sure did. But I've also seen that wreck not go so well. I've seen that wreck go really bad. My son was perfectly fine. And again, no special Jesus juice. But the more these things happen, the more I start to notice them. You can't help but believe in miracles. You can't help but go, man, God is doing something. Because Jesus is way more than we think. I saved this last one because I know it's the most unbelievable. So, in 2018, I don't know what I needed. I think maybe it was just a boost of faith, something. And I didn't get this, it wasn't an original idea with me. I'd actually met somebody that had done it before. And I will tell you, I was sort of giving God the pass too. I was like, God, if you would want to do this, if it's your will, like I'm doing the whole, like, let me get you off the hook, God. And it wasn't going to impact my faith. I was in a safe enough space at that point. It wasn't going to impact my faith if it didn't work. Like I still was totally on board with God. But I think he knew even at that point I needed a faith boost. And so I'm not telling you need to test God in this way. Again, I was very willing for this not to work. But I took my ring off, and what I wanted to do was to put it up to a wall and have it stay there instead of just dropping to the floor. And I decided I would do that. And again, I was ready, fully ready to watch it drop to the floor. Gravity, I believe in, it works, right? And I went to put it up on the wall, and it stayed. Grabbed my family, I was like, come look at this. I took pictures. That's right under our banister on the stairwell in our house. It's just sitting there on the wall. But that doesn't capture the part that changed me forever. It wasn't the fact that it stuck to the wall. See, when I went to put it on the wall, I did not feel it get pulled onto the wall. I felt something go across my hand and push it out of my hand onto the wall. That'll wake you up. And I sat there and just in astonishment that, one, I felt that, and two, that it stayed. And I'm just watching this, and all I could do was praise God. And it was just that reminder that He is there. He really is there. And again, not because I'm a pastor. Again, it could have fallen, wouldn't have changed anything. But what I saw in that was that God wanted to remind me He's there. And He will do that in really subtle ways, and He can do that in really big ways. He is the God who has overcome a lot for us, the wind and the waves, the storms in our lives. And the truth is, some things they just seem impossible until they're not. Until they're not. And so I wanted to have a way to kind of drive that point home. And I thought, what better way than with a scene from one of my favorite movies, Top Gun Maverick. And I wanted to show you this scene where Maverick is trying to do something. He's training some pilots for a very special mission, and it has to be done in a very specific amount of time, 2.5 minutes. It has to be done in a very specific way, flying super low with really tight turns and flips to navigate a canyon. And in order to then make a big jump up, you would take on like 10 Gs. Just a reminder, every G is your body weight. So like 10 times your body weight, and try to stay awake in all of that and not pass out. And they just weren't able to do it. And so the higher ups decide that we're scrapping that. He's not leading you anymore. We're going to go with a completely different mission. And it brings out all new fears. Because things really seem impossible until they aren't. And sometimes we need somebody to show up and remind us that the impossible is possible. Take a look.
Captain Mitchell is no longer your instructor, and as of today, there are new mission parameters. Time to target is now 4 minutes. You'll be entering the valley level at reduced speed, not to exceed 420 knots.
Sir, won't we be giving their planes time to intercept?
Well, Lieutenant, you have a fighting chance against enemy aircraft. What are the odds of surviving a head-on collision with a mountain? You'll be attacking the target from a higher altitude, level with the north wall. It's going to be a little harder to keep your laser on target, but you will avoid the high G climb out.
We'll be sitting ducks for enemy missiles.
Maverick to range control. Entering Point Alpha. Confirm green range.
Maverick, range control. Green range is confirmed. I don't see an event scheduled for you, sir.
Well, I'm going anyway.
Nice.
Setting time to target, 2 minutes, 15 seconds.
2:15, that's impossible.
File attack point. Maverick's inbound. Pumping in 3, 2, 1. Bombs away.
I love Warlock right there at the end. It's the moment when the impossible became possible. Sometimes we need somebody to show us that the impossible is absolutely possible. Jesus wants to show up and do that. We don't always know the why or the when, but we do know that he longs to remind you he's there. He longs to remind you how much he loves you. And it makes me think about what you're up against right now and just ask this question: where do you need a miracle in your life? Where is it that you need the miracle right now? But you know what's more important than that question? Will you believe that God wants to give you the miracle? When Jesus calmed the waters, he asked the disciples afterwards, "Where's your faith? Where's your faith?" He also reminded us at another point that faith is tiny as a mustard seed. Faith as tiny as a mustard seed can move mountains. It can absolutely move a mountain. And so when you are wondering about miracles, I want you to believe in them, but here's the thing. I don't want you to believe in them because some pastor's up here telling you they're so. That's not good enough. I want you to believe in miracles because the God who can calm the storms is way bigger than our doubts and our fears and anything else that would get in the way. He can conquer it all. And He wants to keep doing miracles in your life. We just have to open our eyes to them. Again, I'll say this, sometimes healing doesn't come this side of heaven. It still comes. The impossible is possible because the God who can do that, who can part the Red Sea, who can walk on water, who can raise the dead, who created the universe, can do anything He sets His mind to. And that includes some really big miracles. Believe it, have faith in it, and walk confidently in it. Amen? Let's stand and sing.